Have you ever seen a child be able to reverse their autism?
If we're working towards helping kids to function better, there are things that we can do. And we're told in modern medicine, there's nothing we can do. Every autoimmune condition, every disease, there's a type 1 and a type 2, and some are fully genetic. A lot of it is actually lifestyle. Doctor, the word, comes from the Latin docere, meaning to teach. Where did the teaching go? Our job is to inform parents of the pros and the cons, the risks and the benefits of any decision, and work with them to help them make the best decision for their family.
Is it possible to reverse an autism diagnosis? Can antibiotics for a viral infection be the quick fix you need to get your kids better before a holiday event? What is the best hack for teaching a kid to blow through their nose? Dr. Joel Warsh, who goes by Dr. Gator, is an integrative pediatrician based in Studio City, California. And he's here to entertain all my burning questions on everything from vomiting to what's responsible for the rise in autism, even sleepovers. And boy, does that get spicy. This episode is available to watch on the Real Alex Clark YouTube channel, thanks to generous donations from listeners like you who believe in our mission to heal a sick culture, physically, mentally, and spiritually. You can find a link to leave a tax-deductible donation in the show notes. 5-star reviews, though, are free, and that is the easiest way to support the show at no cost to you. It is the holidays. Do you have the health and wellness girly in your life covered? Shop show merch at tpusamerch.com. Please welcome integrative pediatrician Dr. Joel Warsh, aka Dr. Gator, to Culture Apothecary. As a pediatrician, what are common things that you're seeing parents do with their children that is contributing to the rise of chronic disease?
I think some of the biggest things that are contributing to chronic disease, first of all, are the fact that we're not even aware that the things that we're doing have such a big difference. I mean, I think that in the media, it's really being pushed back as something that we don't have a lot of control over. And actually, we do. And I think it's the food that we're eating, the toxins that we're exposed to, the high levels of stress, the lack of exercise. These are all the basic foundations of what we need to be healthy. I talk about the seeds of health or the foundation of health being stress, environment, and toxins, exercise, diet, and sleep. But at the end of the day, it's really these basic foundations that matter. And it doesn't seem like we're talking about it. It doesn't seem like we're focused on it anymore.
Parents say that it's too expensive. They're too busy to make non-toxic lifestyle changes for their kids. Do you feel like that is a good excuse?
I feel like that is not a good excuse. I think it's understandable. I understand why we say these things. I mean, we're certainly busy and things can cost a lot, but it doesn't have to. And the reality is that we've been, I think, lied to and marketed to over so many years, and we focus on faster, cheaper, better. But what we lose with that is our health. And I believe that it's so important that we reprioritize our health. Yes, absolutely, some things can be more expensive, but it doesn't have to be that way. And we can certainly prioritize our health and do things that are a similar cost, but one thing is a little healthier than the other by just reading labels. We can spend more time cooking. We can cook bigger meals. We can plant a garden. I mean, there are many ways to do this. So yes, I understand that people are busy and that things can cost more money, but I think it's so vital that we put this back into the equation. And I think if we start to do that, then we can find ways within our budget, within our time frame, that we can be a little healthier.
How long have you been a pediatrician?
About 10 years.
Has the amount of children being diagnosed with autism changed slowly over time, or has it increased rapidly?
I would say it's very rapid. I mean, if you look at the statistics, you go back 20 to 50 years, it was like 1 in 10,000. Even some studies said 1 in 25,000. Then it was down to 1 in 1,000, then 1 in 150. And now it's 1 in 36 or 1 in 22 in California. It's insane how rapidly it has increased over the last 20, 30 years. First of all, the big question is, why is this happening? That is so frustrating as a pediatrician and as a dad, that whether we're talking about any chronic disease or autism specifically, why we're not talking about this more and why we're not figuring it out. We don't have a list to say, well, these are the top 10 things that you should be doing, or these are the top 10 things that we could be doing. Most of what you hear, especially in mainstream media, is it's just that we're better at diagnosis. It's that we've change the criteria. And that's true to some degree, of course. I mean, we certainly are more aware of autism, and the diagnostic criteria have changed a little bit, but not that much in the last 20 years. So that is not what's going on. Plus, if you go back 50 years, I mean, when you look at the children who have autism today, about 25% are nonverbal. So where were those kids 50 years ago? I mean, they might have had a different diagnosis, but there'd be all these kids that were nonverbal with some other diagnosis. It didn't exist. I don't remember it. Most people don't remember it. And yet we're saying, oh, we're just better at diagnosing. That is not true. We are a little bit. So that's a small portion of it, but you don't go from, let's say in year 2000, 1 in 1,000 down to 1 in 22 over that short a time frame because of genetics and diagnosis. It's happening more. It's everywhere. And if you look around, you can see that.
What is the media not telling parents about autism?
I think the media is not telling parents that we are doing this. Something is going on in our society. We don't specifically know what that is. I think it's probably many things, but what we are doing is actually causing this epidemic in some way. And I believe a part of that is we don't want to blame or shame parents, but it's not about blame or shame. Nobody should feel like they did something wrong. But if we don't acknowledge that the toxins that we're being exposed to contribute to this, or figure out what's going on, then how are we going to do anything different? And we're just going to see it get worse and worse and worse. And the numbers are going to keep increasing. And we all should be on the same team here. We're about kids' health. We want healthy kids. We want kids to be as vibrant as possible. If we're just saying that it's happening more, we're not protecting these kids. We're not helping these kids, and we're not supporting them as much as we can. And some kids with autism, extremely highly functioning. That's great. But there are so many kids that can't function very well. The families are having serious issues with a child who's nonverbal, who's hurting themselves, who's stimming all the time, who has serious difficulty integrating into society. And for those families, it can be extraordinarily frustrating and difficult. And why are we not working towards helping the people that want to work to improve symptoms or to help these kids to function as best as we can? Isn't that our job as a society? Isn't that my job as a pediatrician and a health advocate to help support families as much as we can to help their kids to be the most resilient and healthy that they can be? If you're happy with everything, great, that's wonderful. But there are a lot of families that aren't. And I feel like they're getting left out.
One of the best arguments against this, we're just getting better at testing for autism. Talking points that I've heard is from RFK Jr. He talked about how his family founded the Special Olympics and that they would find a way to work with any type of person with severe disabilities, people that were basically vegetables. They would still be able to work with them. They would find ways. He said that back then when the Special Olympics was founded, they didn't have these people that were stimming, headbanging, shrieking, violent. That didn't exist. Then he talked about if it is true that we've just gotten better at testing autism, and that is why we're seeing this increase of numbers, why don't you see elderly people walking around in public with these symptoms? Wouldn't we be able to be like, oh, you have autism, autism, and they'd all be in helmets, freaking out, violent, shrieking, unable to handle audio, noise, colors? We don't see that. You only see those symptoms in children, younger and younger. What do you think about that?
Right. And I think that's absolutely true. The difficult part with autism, and what I think has made this so complicated, is that it's such a wide spectrum for autism. And there are a lot of adults that were never diagnosed with autism, but a lot of them are on the much milder side of that spectrum. And so they're fully functioning adults that didn't even know they were autistic and then got the diagnosis when they're older. But what we're seeing with kids, especially with the severe autism, and I think that's a huge part of it, it's very different. It almost should be, I think, a separate diagnosis. And that's where I think we're running into issues, because they're very highly functioning kids and they're kids that are having a lot of difficulty. And so sometimes those two things get compared and they're put in the same box when they may not exactly be. And so that I do think there's just so many more kids with such severe autism right now. And that's why we're seeing this. And that's why they didn't see it before, because I don't think it existed or didn't exist in the same way, or certainly wasn't as common, not even close to what we're seeing now.
So I just interviewed Dr. Bob Sears. He said that in all of the years, 25 years or whatever of his practice, he's never once seen a child who was not vaccinated get some kind of serious illness because they weren't vaccinated. Now that was his, anecdote, his personal story in his practice, but you're also a pediatrician. And so I'm wondering, for any of your patients who opted to not vaccinate their children, did anyone come down with any serious illness because of that choice?
No, they haven't. I haven't seen it. I mean, I certainly read about it. Now, in the hospital when I worked, I did see some kids with bad whooping cough, but that's really it. I haven't seen a lot of it. I mean, if you look at the statistics of the vaccine preventable illnesses, they're very rare. And they're very rare. The argument would be that that's because people are vaccinating, and I'm sure that's true or partially true, but we don't see a lot of these things today. And when I have discussions with parents, I mean, we're talking about risk and reward, and that's the discussions we should be having about vaccines. And it's unfortunate that you just mentioned the word and everybody goes nuts and starts fighting about vaccines and everything with that topic. But at the end of the day, it's about healthy kids. And we should be having these discussions so parents can make informed decisions. I never tell people what to do. I don't think that's our job as a doctor. And I'm so frustrated to see that we've moved to this way in medicine where it's like telling people what to do. I mean, doctor, the word comes from the Latin docere, meaning to teach. Where did that go? Where did the teaching go? Our job is to inform parents of the pros and the cons, the risks and the benefits of any decision, and work with them to help them make the best decision for their family. And these days, it seems like there's so much telling and not partnering. And of course, if you're someone's doctor, a lot of times they're going to take your advice, and that's hopefully going to be a good thing. But at the end of the day, we're supposed to be having these discussions, and it doesn't seem like it's happening with vaccines or many topics. And I think that's a real shame and something we need to get back to, because hesitancy is higher than ever, because I feel like people don't trust the system anymore. And that's not a good thing either. We need to build that trust back for our kids. We need to not lie to people. We need to be honest, and we need to have tough discussions like about autism, and we have to put everything on the table because we literally don't know. We cannot say that vaccines cause autism, because I've seen kids with autism that never had a vaccine.
Right.
So that absolutely can't be the only cause. And I think there are so many things going on, and the fact that we don't know, the fact that this isn't a priority, that we're not doing, 500 double-blind control trials with thousands or millions of kids to figure this out. I mean, we have big databases. Countries have databases for all of their kids, and we have no idea what's going on or why this is happening. I think we do. I think we know, personally, that it's the food and the toxins, but we don't officially know that, and we have to, so we can help move this in a different direction.
Picture this. It's Christmas night. The lights are twinkling and the kids are rummaging through the pantry, craving something sweet. They pull out the hot chocolate mix that you grew up with, the one that you remember sipping as a child, feeling nostalgic, until you take a closer look. Corn syrup, mono and diglycerides, hello, trans fats, and artificial flavor, a label that could be hiding all sorts of mystery ingredients. Suddenly, that comforting, nostalgic cup doesn't feel so cozy anymore. It's time for a change, and I've got the perfect solution. Taylor Duke's Wellness Organic Hot Chocolate. Made with only the highest quality organic ingredients, this mix offers that classic old-fashioned hot chocolate taste that we all love, but without the junk. No artificial flavors, colors, or preservatives, just organic, real ingredients, lightly sweetened with organic stevia and monk fruit, so it's better for you and your family. Whether you're cozying up after a Christmas light viewing or enjoying a peaceful winter evening, this healthier spin on a childhood favorite is perfect for all ages. Taylor Duke's Wellness is your one-stop shop for organic protein powders, electrolytes, coffee, pancake mix, and of course, hot chocolate. Head over to TaylorDukesWellness.com and use code AlexClark for 10% off your order. That's TaylorDukesWellness.com with code AlexClark for 10% off premium organic products for the whole family. You have a lot of celebrity patient clients in LA. What would shock parents about some of the medical or health decisions that celebrities are making for their children?
I think some of the things that would be shocking are that people don't always practice what they preach. So I think that is something that is really unique. And also that when you look at social media, A lot of celebrities or influencers will post one thing, but actually will be doing something completely different. I think that doesn't
So do
help.
you mean like there are celebrities that tell you that you should inject something and then they are not willing to do the same to their own children?
I have seen that before, yes. But even more simply, like the 1 month old visit, everybody's not at their best after they have a 1 month old. They haven't slept very long. Maybe they got, spit up all over themselves and things are kind of in disarray. Or maybe they just came in the office and they were crying because they're having a very difficult time. And then you see an hour later, the perfect post with them in their nursery, smiling, hashtag blessed to be a mom, hashtag blessed. It's like, I just saw you. You're not the same person that's posted this thing online. And that is tough on a lot of parents because they see this and they want to live, to that standard or they feel like that's the way that it should be. And the reality is that we all go through the parenting struggles. And the more that we can see the reality of the world, I think the more that it helps people to know that it's okay to have a tough day. So I think that's one thing that people don't realize because social media is so curated, especially with an influencer. And they're only posting the best things. They're not showing you all the other stuff.
That's like really important insight, I think, for a lot of moms that just struggle with comparison when they're scrolling on Instagram or TikTok. Do you know anything about rates of autism in Amish communities?
So it's an interesting topic because there have been some studies and they're near zero. There have been some studies that have come out to say there were none or maybe 2 or 3 cases in a large population. So it's much lower than the average population. But the counter argument to that is that they're not diagnosing those kids. But I have seen some studies where they took the kids theoretically to an outside practitioner who was able to independently evaluate it and they still didn't find it. So I think it is very interesting and it's probably accurate. I feel like it's the chemicals and toxins that we're exposed to mixed with the lack of nutrients. And so people want to point to one specific thing when it comes to what is causing autism. But I think if you look at the Amish population, it's how they're living that makes a difference. And,
Yeah.
and I think that is true because in my practice, I have a very select population of parents who are already holistically minded to some degree. That's why they're choosing to come there. And the rates of everything are so much lower than in the rest of the population. And it's not because I'm some magical doctor. It's because of the way that they live their lifestyle. I rarely see obesity or overweight kids in my practice when half the population has that. And that wasn't the case when I was working at the hospital, but in my practice, most kids are fit. Very few are overweight or obese. Almost none have diabetes, right? Like you can't even find it. And 33% are pre-diabetic or diabetic. I mean, it's an insane difference. And that's not because of some magic beans. It's because they live a healthier lifestyle. They're conscious.
Have you ever seen a child be able to reverse or completely lose their autism?
There is debate about what autism is, but for sure, symptoms. I've seen it reverse. I work with Documenting Hope. I'm one of their advisors, and they had that recent study.
Tell us about it. I don't know about it.
So 2 20-month-old twins had severe autism. They worked for 2 to 3 years with functional practitioners, and they both had severe autism. And then over those 2 years, by doing a lot of testing, changing up their diet, changing up their lifestyle, their symptoms drastically improved to the point where one didn't have the diagnosis of autism anymore, doesn't have autism symptoms, and the other one was in the low category. And then the follow-up with that child after the study was that they also lost the diagnosis. So I mean, it's definitely happened. I've seen it in my practice too. If we're working towards helping kids to function better, there are things that we can do. And we're told in modern medicine, there's nothing we can do. But the fact that we see this happening just over a year or two needs to tell us that it's not just genetics. It is our lifestyle. And if we start to take our power back, we start to take control of our own families, then there is a lot that we can do. Not always. Of course, there are genetic factors in some conditions like cystic fibrosis. No matter what you do, you're still going to have it. But it doesn't mean you can't live a healthier lifestyle to live in the most healthy way that you can. And I think that is true of almost every condition. And it's so interesting to me because you look at diabetes and that theory is common across medicine, right? Like type 1 diabetes and type 2. You have someone who's type 2 diabetic, the doctor says, okay, change up your lifestyle, eat a little bit better, and we can see things improve. And then they do. I think that's true of every autoimmune condition, every disease. There's a type 1 and a type 2, and some are fully genetic. And then a lot of it is actually lifestyle. And I think if we change up our lifestyle, we would see a huge difference. And I think if we stratify it like that, that would give people a lot of power.
Are parents bringing kids to you because they're way too young to be starting puberty?
I don't know that they're coming for that reason, but we definitely see it.
What's going on with that? Why are so many little girls getting puberty?
I think, again, it's the toxins and the chemicals. I think we're seeing all sorts of hormone disruptors, but it's such an interesting topic that nobody's talking about because the average age of puberty even when we were growing up was like 12, 13 for girls, and now it's 8 or 9.
That's really freaky.
That to me is one of those things where you can really very definitively point to environment. You cannot say that that's genetics. We haven't changed when we started puberty in 20, 30 years because of our genetics. That's completely environmental. So why?
If a parent is listening and they're experiencing post-vaccination regret, maybe 24 hours ago, they opted for their child to get a certain vaccine and now they're like, oh my gosh, maybe I made a wrong decision. Do you have any recommendations for detox protocol or just different things that they can do to kind of help support their child's body going through this?
It's insane that we're not studying this to figure out what are the things that we can do to help people detoxify. Usually when I talk to my patients, we just use common sense, being, well, how can we support our body's natural detoxification? So, I mean, the first things that you would think about would be pooping, peeing, and sweating. That's how we get things out. So making sure if the child's older to move a lot more, get outside, drink a lot of fluids, get things out. So magnesium is great support. Vitamin C is a great support. Homeopathic thuja, THUJA is a very common reported to help with detoxification. So these are things that parents can do. I mean, there's no specific protocol because it's never been studied, not from any research I've ever seen. It would be nice to see if there were things we could do to help support detoxification, or if there's anything we could do to minimize side effects in shots. Like, again, why do we not perform research on something that we're doing on all kids to minimize risk? It's not about not doing them, but if you are going to do them, why shouldn't we minimize the risk for kids? Why shouldn't we figure out, is there any ingredient inside of these things that could be contributing to a side effect or a risk? And maybe we could take that out. Maybe we could change it. Maybe we could change up the schedule to make it safer. I don't know, right? Like, I don't have the answer to these things, but if we're doing something to every child many times, do we not think that we should be consistently studying that to figure out how we do it the safest possible if you're going to do it? Why are we trusting companies to do that? Of course, they're not going to study these things to figure out problems with their own products. We have to do that. We have to push back. This shouldn't be controversial. Why is it controversial to say that we want our kids to be the healthiest and we want to figure out what our risks might be? Because everything has risks. Everything in medicine has a risk. If you give Tylenol, you could have a reaction. If you take a medication, you can have a reaction. So of course there are side effects.
Do you ever tell your patients to take Tylenol?
I don't tell people to do it in general unless they're really a high fever or they're miserable. I mean, usually the recommendations would be, if they're okay, I would just let it run its course. I mean, fevers are not a bad thing.
What is the temperature of a fever that you'd be like, that's the temp, you need to bring your kid to the doctor?
I would say over 103 is a good marker to bring your kid to the doctor. Not necessarily that it's an emergency. So, I mean, first of all, we have to go back a little bit because there's two different age categories there. If your kid's under 2 months, a fever is an emergency. It's something you should get checked. And I think that's where a lot of the fever phobia comes from, because a fever in a baby is very different.
Okay.
So for a baby, they just don't have a fully developed immune system yet. And so they get sick really quickly if they are sick with something. And that's why the protocol is that you go to the emergency room, you go to the doctor right away if you have a fever. So that's different. Once you're older, like a toddler, if they have a fever, it's not something that you should necessarily be worried about. It's something that is a good reaction that your body is doing to fight off the infection, to raise your temperature, to kill the pathogen, to improve your immune response. So I would just leave it be. Unless your child is incredibly miserable, can't sleep, just leave it alone. I'm much more worried about a child who has a 101 temperature, who's having trouble breathing, than even a 104. And if it's over 103, you probably do want to get checked, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's an emergency.
As a pediatrician, what do you think about a parent giving their kid Gatorade and Campbell's chicken noodle soup if their kid is sick?
I would not give those things. I mean, what were people doing back in the day? They were making it. It was like bone broth. That's not the same thing. You're giving kids sugar and chemicals and dyes. It's ridiculous. My 5-year-old last week had his first soccer game. Super cute. Kids were running the wrong way, scoring on the wrong goal. Fantastic. Game was over. The coach pulls out the blue Gatorade, the Doritos, the chips, and my mouth dropped. I was like, oh man. But luckily, he knows enough to say no thank you, which is great. But you look around the whole field and all the kids and all the different teams are getting Gatorade, Doritos, chips. I mean, can we at least give out fruit?
Yeah, that's something that a lot of my audience complains about to me. They say like, gosh, we do so well at home and stuff. And then it's the sporting activities that my kids are involved in. The food is atrocious. I mean, so my idea is like, well, I guess I'd just be volunteering as a parent. Like, okay, I guess can I volunteer to do all the snacks? Because, I just wouldn't trust anybody else.
It's really tough because I think that we don't want to be the one parent that's the weird one or the crunchy one or whatever. But I mean, you just have to be. Number one, there are so many people out there that are health conscious and they're just not connected. And the more that I've talked about this, the more that people have thanked me just for kind of connecting them and realizing that there's actually so many health conscious people out there. And at the end of the day, if you want to be the one with a healthy child, you have to kind of set those boundaries. I think it's important. I mean, if you live the way that everybody else is living, 1 out of 2 kids have a chronic disease. If you want one of your kids to be on medications in a couple of years, then I guess it's okay. Keep doing what we're doing. But other than that, it's okay to bring your kid fruit to the sporting event. I think it's okay every now and again to let them have a treat. That's fine. They're at a party, have a couple of bites. I'm not all or none, but it's way too often. And I think if we teach them about healthy eating, not only are we going to be supporting them in the long run, you're going to be teaching them how to make healthy choices, which is the goal, right? It's not to force them to eat healthy. It's to teach them about what they should be looking for, what ingredients they need to be reading about, what is healthy, what's good for them versus not good for them. And they get it. My kid's 5 and he gets it. We had another treat for him and he loved that.
Yeah.
So he wasn't deprived. When he's probably like 10, it's going to be harder, I think.
How much screen time is appropriate for a toddler?
Again, you got to stratify it a little bit because the American Academy of Pediatrics says 0 screen time between 0 to 2. And I think that stresses out a lot of parents. I think that's not the best recommendation. I have many parents that come in because their baby, 6-month-old, turn their head to watch the screen while their toddler was watching a cartoon and they freak out because they feel like it's turning their brains to mush, which is not the case. The problem with screen time is putting your child in front of the screen for a long time instead of parenting. It's all the things that we're not doing. When we're talking about the older kids, 7 to 9 hours is the average amount of screen time for kids.
A day?
A day. That is the number. That's the statistic. It's insane. We're not getting outside. We're not getting into nature. We're not cooking as a family. We're not communicating. So that to me is the problem, what we're not doing. And we're seeing that gradual creep from toddlers to older kids going up and up and up. I'm not against screen time. Screens are here. They're not going anywhere. I think if you got to do your homework on screen, that's fine. If you're on a trip and you're traveling, or you're on a plane or a long car ride, do as much as you can as a family. And instead of having a toddler who is screaming and crying and having a tantrum, I think that's a great time to pull out an educational cartoon. So that to me is not the problem. It's decreasing it, minimizing it, using it as a tool. I'm okay with that. If you want to have 0 screen time, I think that's totally fine and reasonable. But I don't think parents should be shamed or feel bad if they pull out a screen because they're on a 5-hour plane ride or something like that. I think that's a good tool that we've been given. I'm okay with that, but I would minimize it as much as we can. And I think it's important to note that you can learn from screens. Kids can learn. There's a lot of research on that. There's a lot of research on Sesame Street from many years ago that we do learn from screens. So it's not that it's all bad. It's just, what are they watching? And all of the research also shows that you don't learn as well from screens as you do from a person.
Isn't there research that shows that there are certain types of kids shows that are worse on the brain than others?
There is a lot of conflicting research. A lot of these things are too new and the shows are always switching. But I think if it's an educational program, if they're learning something, then at the end of the day, to me, that's not what I would be super worried about. It's those shows that they're really not learning much. They're very fast paced. They're kind of talking down to them. That to me is where we run into issues. But there's so many things to be stressed about and so many things to focus on. To me, half hour here or there is not what I'm worried about. It's the lengthening and the going for hours of watching screen time. That to me is where I'd put my focus and put my energy, because there's just so many other things that we need to do that I don't think a parent needs to feel bad if they need to go to the bathroom or cook a meal and they put their kids in front of a screen for 15 or 20 minutes. That's not what I'm worried about.
What's going on with the new speech guidelines for toddlers?
The theory was that they wanted to make them more useful in terms of identifying problems. And so they moved them back from average to where it's an issue. And so there was a lot of debate and discussion about how they've changed things because kids are not doing as well, which I think is true. It's to some sense that kids are not doing as well. But
is it possible they're not doing well because those kids right now that would be in that age range were born during the pandemic?
I think that's certainly a part of it. Kids are very resilient, so I think most of them have bounced back and will bounce back, for the most part. But I think that was very tough. It was one of the worst things we ever did to kids. We did literally the opposite of everything we know about health during the pandemic. And so I think the kids suffered. And maybe to me, the bigger issue with the pandemic for kids was the mental aspect of it. I think from an educational standpoint, most of them will probably bounce back over time. But mentally, especially for the younger kids, you have all these kids that really don't know the world and then all of a sudden heard about disease and pandemic and this is going to kill you, this is going to kill grandma. And then a couple years later, oh, well, COVID's still around, but I guess it's all right. Just go back to your daily life. And these kids don't know any different. So it's really stressed them out. And I wonder how that's going to affect them long term. But I think in terms of the development, the milestone change isn't really, at least from what I've seen, nefarious in any way. It was just more about changing the guidelines to help you to identify when a problem was because they were the median before.
Do parents need to be stressed out about their kids hitting milestones?
I think that we are way too stressed out about comparing ourselves to others. So I think we need to minimize that. I think it's good to have milestones. We need to know where kids are in general, because of course there are situations where it gets way outside of normal. And that's something that's useful to know so you can get them into intervention to help. But most of these guidelines are about a kid in the middle. So let's say talking and walking around 1. If your kid is 13 months old and not talking, there's nothing to be worried about. Half the kids are not talking at that time. I think we just need to put that into perspective. And also remember, again, back to social media, everybody posts about the good things. You can have your child who walks at 10 months and they're posting about, oh my God, my child's walking at 10 months, but they don't post about how their child didn't start talking until they were 18 months. We're comparing to our friends, to our other kids, to our family members. And I think we just need to focus back to our kids. I mean, that's literally the title of my book, Parenting at Your Child's Pace, because I think that we're so focused on everybody else. And I think we need to get back to focusing on our own family. And nothing drives that point home more than when you have more than one kid, because you realize that whatever worked for one kid doesn't necessarily even work for your other child. And every kid is so different that we need to really get back to focusing on our kids and figuring out what our parenting gut says. We don't trust ourselves anymore. I mean, I think that's the root of a lot of parenting stress.
Yeah, I feel like the system itself puts so much doubt in parents that, you don't know what's best. Only experts, quote unquote, know what's best. And just the damage that that's doing to parents when they feel like, oh, maybe I don't know what I'm doing.
Right. It's in many ways the most difficult time to be a parent, because if you think you go back 50 years, 100 years, if you wanted to do something for your kid or know something, what did you do? You asked grandma, right? You were like, hey, what did you start feeding me and when? Oh, I did peas at 6 months. Okay, I guess I'll do that. Unless you wanted to go to the library and take out a book or something like that, then, you didn't have any other information. Now,
we have too much information.
Grandma says one thing, right? Yeah. And then the internet says the other thing. It's like, start with carrots. No, you can never start with carrots. That will kill them.
Start with bone marrow.
Right. And so there's so many different opinions. They're all contradictory. And so you feel like you're in the middle and you feel like you can't make a decision because you're stuck in, no matter what you do, it's going to be wrong. And nobody ever taught us how to use social media, how to use the internet, and how to filter things out. And I think that's so important because the internet is built around scaring you, right? Social media is built around scaring. It's about headlines and news. Everything when you read it will tell you it's going to kill your child or give you the worst case scenario. And not that we can't read the internet, but I think we need to synthesize the information, learn about what's out there, and then bring it to the middle somewhere and figure out what we feel like is going to be best for our child, and then do that. There's no one right way to do it. And I think that if we realize that, then it will take a lot of pressure off of every little decision, which really doesn't matter that much anyways. Things like baby-led weaning versus purees. There's some research on both sides, but if you're going to be stressed to give your kid chunks of food, why are you doing that? Do the other thing.
You're probably over here slamming energy drinks that promise to level up your life, but instead just leave you shaking like a meth addict on Christmas morning. Hunter Biden, where you at? Well, guess what? There's a better way to not feel like your heart is about to explode. It's called You Again Super Honey. Yeah, that's right, honey. The stuff bees make when they're not busy being threatened by pesticides and corporate greed. Real raw honey, not the toxic sugar syrup in a plastic bear. This isn't some woo-woo new age nonsense. You Again Super Honey is inspired by an ancient Indian remedy where they blended herbs, spices, and raw honey. Not because it's trendy, but because it actually works. Your grandma probably gave you some form of this stuff whenever you were a kid to cure a sore throat, heal a wound, or give you a burst of energy so that you could run around and break things like a normal child. Remember when kids used to break things? Now they brain rot in their iPad. That's because they need to eat raw honey from You Again. This honey's got everything, okay? Slow release energy, immunity, and gut support. And it's not just some random product that your gym bro swears by. This stuff's been featured in Forbes, Clean Eating, and Food Business News. So you know it's legit. Plus, it's made in the USA, supports regenerative farming, and helps our US beekeepers. So if you're sick of feeling like garbage after your third cup of coffee, grab You Again Raw Super Honey in chocolate, wild spiced, lemon turmeric, or Himalayan salt. It's in these little pouches, so you can throw it in your purse, feel like you've got your life together, and, you know, even if you're just one bad decision away from a full-on breakdown. No one has to know! Head to Amazon, add You Again Super Honey to your cart, and use code ALEX for 15% off. That's You Again Raw Super Honey on Amazon. Use code ALEX for 15% off. This is a story about a mom who refused to accept the status quo. Jen Thatcher was a successful international artist until her world stopped. Her kids were getting seriously ill from the products in their home, the ones that were supposed to be safe. Even the so-called natural options weren't strict enough. And then came the ultimate wake-up call. Her son Jack was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Jen decided that she wasn't going to wait around for someone else to create truly non-toxic products. She left her career behind and founded Zebra, a brand rooted in faith, freedom, and the belief that you deserve to know exactly what's in the products that you use every single day. Take their Bright deodorant, okay? It's aluminum-free, paraben-free. It's made with naturally mined sodium bicarbonate, arrowroot powder, and essential oils. No irritants, no lies, just a clean, effective way to stay fresh for men and women. Or Zebra toothpaste. No fluoride, no trendy ingredients discovered by NASA. Just proven natural ingredients like calcium carbonate and theobroma cacao to strengthen and protect your teeth, plus xylitol. Jen created Zebra for her kids and for yours. Everything is black and white with no hidden toxins and no compromises. Because when it comes to your family's health, there's no room for gray. Go to yayzebra.com, use code ALEX for 10% off. That's yayzebra.com, code ALEX for 10% off. Clean, safe, and created with love because you deserve better. Would you, as a pediatrician, send your kids to daycare?
I'm not against sending them to daycare. I just think that, number one, you can take care of your kids better than anybody else can. So if you can do that, I think that's great. I think a huge problem with modern daycare is that you send your kids to school and go to daycare because you need to. You know, we have a society where both parents work now for the most part, and that means that they need to go to work. And so they need daycare to take care of their children. And what does that mean? Well, you send your kid back before they're ready to go back if they're sick. And so you send your kids to school and they're just always sick. They're always coming home. It's something like 5 to 10 viruses are average a year for a younger child. And you see the kids in daycare, they get sick all the time versus the kids that are not rarely get sick because they're just not exposed as much.
Yep.
So personally, I think if you have the option and you can stay home or you can hire somebody to take care of your kids, great. That's not an option for everybody, so I get it. But at least if you're going to do a daycare, the most minimal amount of kids possible.
What are the best natural remedies for vomiting and diarrhea?
First of all, the best thing is just to make sure that we're getting a lot of fluids, right? So if you can get some bone broth or some homemade, soup or things like that, I think that's very helpful for vomiting. Nettles is really good for vomiting.
Like stinging nettles?
Stinging nettles is really good. Chamomile is really good for vomiting, so calming the stomach. Magnesium is really good for calming the stomach for vomiting.
Which magnesium would you do for that?
Like a mixture of magnesium, so like glycinate's really good.
Okay.
A lot of times with vomiting, it's good to just kind of let it run its course. Almost every research study shows that with vomiting and diarrhea, the more that we do, the worse it is for the kids. So a lot of times it can be really helpful just to kind of let it run its course. For diarrhea, like something to bulken up the stool can be helpful. So, people use rice sometimes, or like the brat diets, like bananas, things like that can be helpful just to take in some of that liquid. Psyllium seed husk is really good for that as well. So sometimes parents will do that and it sucks up a lot of liquid. So these are some of the things that I found.
Is alternative or holistic medicine woo-woo?
Shouldn't be. So to me, alternative medicine or integrative medicine is blending the best of modern medicine with alternative and holistic practices. I don't think it's woo-woo at all. I think that integrative medicine focuses on prevention. It focuses on root cause. There are so many different modalities out there that we can integrate. I'm not against Western medicine at all. We are very lucky that we have medications. We are very lucky that we have an emergency room. These are fantastic things, but we're so quick to use medications, and it should be the last resort. If we have an emergency, great. We have an antibiotic, you can get better in 2 days, but that should be something we use minimally.
Now that we're in the holidays and people have stuff to go to, what do you think about the parents that give their kids antibiotics to treat some viral infection quickly so that they can go to some event?
That is a very bad idea because, first of all, antibiotics don't treat viruses, right? They don't do anything. So you're only getting negative, you're only getting side effects, and you're not getting any benefits. It's really important to know that because if you look at the statistics, most times that a child is sick, over 90%, it's a virus, probably closer to 99%. So antibiotics actually do nothing except give you side effects. So if you have a bacterial infection that you're treating, that's what an antibiotic is useful for. And I have seen that so clearly in my office. I used to give out antibiotics like candy when I was working in the hospital because that's what we did and that's what we were taught. I knew everything off by heart. You'd give them 10 times a day. I almost never give antibiotics anymore, maybe once or twice a month. My kids are just as healthy. They're not ending up in the hospital all the time. I have to look up doses now because most people don't want it and they understand that you should use it only when you need it. And that is a huge difference. And it's not like my kids are less healthy. They're doing just fine.
So what are like the only instances that you would prescribe an antibiotic?
So if it's a bacterial infection, so like a pneumonia, an ear infection that's not improving, that's bacterial, a strep throat, things like that, where you have a identifiably treatable illness that you're going after. I mean, if you go to an urgent care for ear pain, 10 out of 10 times you're getting antibiotics, even though less than 1 out of 10 times you need it.
What do you mean? What else would you use for an ear infection if it wasn't antibiotics?
Nothing.
Oh, really? You just leave it?
Usually.
What if the kid's in pain and stuff? What do you do?
The thing to know is if you look at the statistics, and this is not woo-woo medicine, this is modern medicine, look at the American Academy guidelines. When they did the research on ear infections, most of it is viral, and then most of it is not treated by amoxicillin, even if it is bacterial. The body usually clears it on its own. If it's not serious, so if you're not having significant pain, and it's not bilateral, you're not having really bad fevers or miserable, then the guidelines say you should wait 48 hours before starting antibiotics. And I have seen that if you don't give medication, usually it's cleared and usually it gets better on its own. So it's okay to take a prescription in case it doesn't get better. Sometimes you need it, but usually you do not. And I would say with ear pain in my office, maybe one out of 50 or 1 out of 100 actually end up using antibiotics for their ear pain, and their ears are all fine. One of the keys to that, though, is having good communication with your doctor, right? Because sometimes you do need it. And so if it's getting worse, if the pain seems way outside of normal, then that may be a reason to do it. So it's not that there isn't bacterial ear infections, but that's not the norm. And when you go to urgent care, they're going to look at your ears, they're going to see it's a little red. They're going to give it to you because they don't want to get sued for the one kid out of a million that their eardrums burst. And they say, well, why didn't you treat me? So they treat defensively in America because we're like, well, we'll give them antibiotics. But if you are a parent, the question you should ask is, do I need to take this?
Okay.
That's the question to ask as a parent, because what happens is doctors will treat you because they think that's what you want and they want to cover their butt. So they'll say, well, it seems like it's an ear infection. Here's your antibiotic. If you ask them, do I need to take this? Then a lot of them will say, well, you can hold on to this for a day or two, see if it gets better. If it doesn't get better, take it. Or they'll say, yes, you should take it because I think it's a bacterial pneumonia and your kid's going to get really sick and it's important. That's an important question to ask because you can stratify the risk there, and then you have a good reason to take it or not.
What is your post-antibiotic protocol to get your gut back in order?
So for a healthy kid in general, I don't think, again, you have to do anything. To me, it's about eating healthy. But if you want to do probiotics, I think that's completely reasonable. So something like vitamin C, vitamin D, probiotics, and omegas
Okay.
can be a reasonable thing to do. Again, I don't think that we have to do a lot for our kids. I think it's fine to do it if you want to. But if you're doing one course of antibiotics and your kid's otherwise healthy and goes back to running around and playing, then I would focus on decreasing their sugar, making sure they're eating healthy, getting outside once they're feeling better, and their body's going to figure it out.
What is your controversial take on sleepovers as a pediatrician?
My kid, the 5-year-old, he had a play date with his friend, having a great time. And after he asked about sleepovers, and I didn't even know he knew about this. I guess he said on TV, probably on Bluey or something like that. And that got me talking to my wife about sleepovers. And my wife said, oh, I used to love sleepovers. I think I did it around when I was 8 or maybe 10. And I don't remember exactly when I did it, but I think it must have been around 10, 12 years old. And I loved them. I had such a good time. And so I posted a poll about that on my Instagram. And the options were something like 8 to 10, 10 to 12, 12 to 14, or 14 plus, something like that. And hundreds of people wrote me never.
Yeah.
And so much so that I changed it. I kind of redid it and put never in just to see. And it was like 70% of people said never. And the amount of stories that people sent me about like life traumas, things that they've heard, I never thought about sleepovers, but it seems like the consensus for most people is to not do it. I don't know if that's true or not. I think if you know people and you have close family members or friends that you can trust, then I think that's okay. But at the same time, a lot of the counter argument to that is the people that might abuse kids are the people that you trust the most. So sometimes it's hard to know.
Can I say, and this is like one of the disclaimer, I'm not a parent. So I fully acknowledge that perhaps my mind will change. But I will say, as of now, one of my most controversial takes on sleepovers is that I am pro sleepover. I fully agree. It's the, a couple handful of families that you know and you trust very, very well, or family. I love sleepovers. And my opinion is that we have people parenting in absolute states of fear. Mm-hmm. So they're ruling out, they're saying never, and they're terrified of this, serial abuser or whatever coming after the kid. Now, a lot of my audience is going to be very upset by me saying this because they're going to have personal stories that say otherwise. But I was doing sleepovers probably since I was 8 years old. The best memories of my life, the most fun. And I think that played a huge role in just like me experiencing like true girlhood, true childhood, my favorite memories. And so I just think a lot of people, it's just this like helicopter parenting, like trying to be so in control to protect them. And I'm just like, I don't know. That's my controversial take on it, is that I'm not totally against it.
I have the same controversial take as you.
Okay.
So maybe it's because I didn't experience a trauma, or maybe because I had so much fun. But when I was reading through the comments, there's a good chunk, maybe 25% of them that were personal stories. And then the rest was like, oh, I heard this, or I'm worried about this. And there is no question that we're more worried about everything than ever because we hear about everything. Now, we never heard about all this, the rare things many years ago, but now you always do with social media.
But also think about what happened. We started seeing 80s, 90s, everything became like fear porn on the news and stuff. Like missing children, that was like a huge thing that they would do. All of these true crime shows. I just think it's our generation. Because are you millennial? Okay, so I feel like our generation, we grew up like that started happening of everybody being scared about like, being abducted and all of that kind of stuff. And so now millennials are parents themselves. And so that's just been like indoctrinated into us. And so we're parenting that way.
We're afraid of everything. And we're so overprotective. I mean, that's a huge issue. I'm glad Jonathan Haidt brought that up in his book. He's been talking about it a lot because at least in terms of the research, most of it says that we're much safer in terms of these things than we used to be. So the perception might not actually be the reality. And I think that, absolutely there are things that happen that are bad, but I'm not sure it's as bad as most people think.
I think your kid is more at risk coming in contact with a predator through their phone or their iPad or the game that they're playing on their device than they are at a sleepover or in public. That's my hot take. I think your kids are getting tons of spam, porn messages, bots, predators getting into their DMs on Instagram and Roblox or whatever than they are at their friend's house that they go to school with.
Yeah, and I think the middle ground there is if you are even concerned about it and people are willing to come to your house, do it at your house. Then you're not worried that anything's happening, and they can still have their sleepovers, but at least it's at your house and not at somebody else's house.
Yeah.
I have to think about this more because I never even thought about it. This is such a new thing that's interesting to me. But I would still be okay with my child going, and I agree with you. I think that there are many other ways that there can be risks, but on the flip side, it's a very high risk situation because you're not there and because they're sleeping over. So I get that perspective too. So I can understand both sides.
I love that book, Free Range Parenting by Lenore Skenazy. Number one, that book was just such a great read, so informative and encouraging. But also it was very funny. She has like a really good sense of humor, and she is that original parent that I think went viral. I don't know if it was Dr. Phil or what back in the day, but she came on and said like, oh, I let my 4-year-old like do the whole New York City subway system by themselves. Now, that was like 2010s era. So would I let my kid navigate the New York City subway system in 2024 with crime through the roof and liberal policies wrecking our cities? No. But I think, a smaller city or little town, helping them figure out crossing the street by themselves, all that kind of stuff at 4 or 5 years old, I'm not opposed. I'm not opposed.
Agree. Balance.
Yeah,
right?
it depends on where you are. And everything it depends on your own situation, where you're living, that kind of stuff.
At the end of the day, it's not the extremes. I mean, everything's in the middle somewhere. And I think that we're talking about so many extremes and extreme situations, but where is the place that most of us should parent? It's somewhere in the middle. It's not with extreme fear, but it's not, kind of not caring at all. Like somewhere in the middle, giving your kid reasonable boundaries and reasonable leeway to have some fun without over parenting. That's where I think the happy place is.
What is your hack for helping a kid learn how to blow their nose?
My hack for helping a kid learn how to blow their nose is you take a paper towel roll and you put like a little, something in there, even like a little piece of paper, a little cotton, and then just have them blow into it. And that teaches them to blow out because they're blowing the paper out or they're blowing the little cotton ball out of their feather. And that actually works pretty well.
Okay, I love that. And it's kind of like a game to them. Like, can you get it? And then they're learning. Are there any vaccines as a pediatrician that you think are worth considering?
With vaccines, I would say, if I'm stepping back, I never tell people what to do. I always have discussions with parents and discuss and debate the pros and the cons. The recommendations are the CDC recommendations. I think that if a parent has questions or concerns, and that's something that they need to discuss with their parents, when people message me about, what should I do versus what should I not do, I talk about weighing the pros and the cons for yourself. So especially with vaccines, so what is the risk from the disease? How frequent is it in our society? How severe are the complications if they get it? Versus what are the risks what are the risks from the vaccine? And it's tough with vaccines because I think there's a lot of the risks that we actually don't know or haven't studied very well. So it's hard to get an exact risk versus benefits equation. But I think at the end of the day, if you're choosing to do it, then if parents want to go on a slower schedule or do something different, then that's how they're weighing it. What's around more, what could kill you, and things like whooping cough around more, measles is around more, pneumococcus is around. So these are things that could kill you. Again, not commonly, right? Very rare these days, but if you are the one child to get it and you are the one child to get it very severe, then it could make a big difference for you. And now RSV is another big topic. And I think this is going to be interesting over the next couple of years because RSV definitely can put you in the hospital and definitely can be very severe. And now there's a new vaccine for that. Very difficult to know anything about long-term safety when something's only been around for a couple of years.
That's true.
That was one of the most wild things to me about the pandemic was talking about something as safe when you can't possibly say that. I mean, I think this is where a lot of the public trust got lost was saying something was safe when you can't say that. You can say the known benefits outweigh the known risks. That's something you could say.
Okay.
But you can't say that we know that something's safe because you don't know if everyone's going to grow a third arm in 10
or
years.
Or effective even.
Right. You just can't say anything about long term. You can just say based on the data that we have, based on our research, here's what we found, here's what we know. weigh the pros and the cons for yourself. But you can't say something's safe
And then
long
you know
term.
what? I think, Dr. Gator, if the government would have been saying that during the pandemic, here's the known risks, here's the known pros, weigh those options for yourself. I bet a lot more American parents would have opted to get it.
Right. Because what happened was people were so obviously lied to that they said, well, the heck with all this, I'm not doing anything anymore.
Exactly.
And I have seen more parents than ever come to my office saying, I used to do vaccines and now I don't want to do anything because I don't trust anything with the government. I don't trust anything with pharma anymore. And trust was lost because people were so obviously and so clearly lied to about things that just don't make sense. Again, you can't say something's safe long term if you haven't studied it long term. Everybody knows that. So why would you say it in that way? It's not realistic. And why are we not partnering? Because if you have a new disease and you have a possible prevention, possible treatment for it, then people would line up if they feel like that treatment gives them benefit. And everybody knows that there's possible risks. If you have something new, then I get that there could be a risk that we don't know about. That's obvious, right? We haven't seen it for 5 years, so how could you know? But you have to weigh the decision based on the information that we have at that time.
Yeah.
And I don't know why humans weren't allowed to weigh those risks and have discussions so that we could come to a logical conclusion. And we lost a lot of trust. I mean, the trust in medicine is the lowest it's ever been. Hesitancy is the highest it's ever been. Vaccine rates are the lowest they've ever been. Homeschooling is higher than it's ever been before because people don't trust in the system. And that's crazy. Medicine used to be one of the most trusted professions. I mean, other than firemen, doctors were always at the top, and now doctors are at the bottom, and for good reason. We earned it.
Okay, picture this. You're hosting a New Year's brunch and you're all about starting the year fresh. You're thinking, okay, healthier mimosas. Yes, please. So instead of the usual sugary orange juice, you grab a bottle of squeeze juice, 100% fresh squeezed mandarin and pomegranate juice. It's the real deal, folks. No added sugars, no artificial colors, just pure, vibrant fruit from a small family farm in California. You mix it with sparkling organic wine or even club soda for a mocktail that's perfect for everyone. No hangover, just bright, refreshing flavors. And the best part, it's non-GMO. It's never from concentrate, no water added, just clean, delicious juice that you can trust. And here's the kicker. Squeezed juice isn't just for brunch. I love slipping it into my lunchbox for work. It's healthy, it's clean. I love it. Plus, it's shipped straight to your door, cold and fresh, so it's always ready when you need it. Ready to make the switch? Head to squeezejuice.com, use code ALEX for 25% off your first order. Trust me, once you try this, you are never going to go back to regular juice boxes again. That's squeezejuice.com, and don't forget the code ALEX for 25% off. Oh, darling, let's be real. What's worse than dealing with the chaos of last-minute grocery store runs during the holidays? Imported meat. That's what. It's like giving your guests a gift they never wanted. Disappointment. This year, Good Ranchers is making sure that your holiday meals are nothing less than perfect. With Good Ranchers, you get 100% American meat delivered straight to your door. No antibiotics, hormones, or mystery oils. It's steakhouse quality that'll make you wonder why you ever bothered with the grocery store. Plus, they pre-trim everything, vacuum seal them for freshness. So meal prep, it's a breeze. No more wasted cuts. Grass-fed, grain-finished from small farmers and ranchers in the Midwest who share your conservative values. And let's talk gifts. What's the one thing nobody's ever turned down? A luxury steak box. From ribeyes to surf and turf and even tender fillets, Good Ranchers has a box for everyone on your list. Delivered straight to their door, making you look like the perfect host and gift giver. Now, here's where it gets even better. When you subscribe to Good Ranchers, you get a free cut of meat, chicken, bacon, or salmon for a whole year, plus $25 off with my code Clark. Don't waste another second. Head to goodranchers.com, use my code Clark to treat yourself and your loved ones to something truly special, because this holiday season, it's American meat delivered. Goodranchers.com, code Clark. What would you say to a parent who said, I understand I need to limit my kids' exposure to ultra-processed food as much as possible, but Dr. Gator, when I tried to give them macaroni and cheese that was homemade and not out of the box, when I tried to make our own chicken nuggets versus, Tyson chicken nuggets, when I tried to give them homemade chicken noodle soup versus Campbell's chicken noodle soup, they hated it, rejected it, and thought it was gross and refused to eat it. So I just feel like I have to keep feeding them that stuff.
You don't have to keep feeding them that stuff. I think that first of all, whenever you make a change, there's always going to be some pushback. Kids are addicted to this food. And like any addiction, it takes a little bit of time to break that addiction. And so you first of all have to practice what you preach. You have to get that stuff out of the house or stop buying it. You have to stop eating it yourself because it's not fair to eat an Oreo cookie and then not expect them to eat it. Kids will eat homemade food. They will eat it if you start to prepare it. You have to give it some time, keep trying. And your goal is not to force them to eat things. It's to give them great food that they love, that they are excited to eat. And that sometimes will come with a little bit of trial and error, or a little bit of practice and doing different things. But at the end of the day, they will eat it. They're not going to starve themselves. So,
what are some meals that do really well in your house with kids?
I mean, my kids eat all the same food that we eat. So I mean, we make everything, nothing's, pre-prepared from our house. So just making chicken, making lamb, steak.
Maybe this is mean and judgmental. People will come after me, but here's the deal. Your kids don't have a job. They can't drive to the store and get their own food. So if you as a parent don't have any of this in the house, you say, this is what we made, sorry, then maybe they don't eat the first night and that's on their own. And then, they're going to be hungry and they're just going to eat what you have. If there's no other options, if you stop giving them options, what else are they going to do?
Right. That's called parenting.
Right.
That's called parenting, setting boundaries.
When people say like, well, my kids hated it, they refused to eat it. I'm like,
too bad.
Yeah. But see, people will say that's judgmental and
I don't
mean.
care. So it's judgmental and mean. But what do you care about, being judgmental and mean or having a healthy kid in 5 or 10 years? Kids are unhealthy. And if we don't change that paradigm, you have a little bit of difficulty for a week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever it is. And then you're going to have a child who's not going to have a chronic disease. Then that's your job as a parent. And they might be upset at you for a couple of minutes, but they won't. The kids that eat healthy, they're not being deprived. The food is better. Trust me. Take them to a farmer's market, let them try one of those apples or one of those berries. They're going to like it a lot more. And if your kids don't like the cooking, you might not be the best cook. And that's like not to say that to put something more on parents, but a lot of us didn't learn to cook. So if that's the case, then maybe you take a cooking class, maybe you watch some things online. It matters how you prepare the food for sure. But healthy, nutritious food, kids will eat it.
And people have to understand when we talk about like the food is addictive, it is literally weaponized to addict you. That's why the food companies hired the cigarette scientists to create as addictive food as possible. That's why you've got 7 different names, or it might be more than 7 now, different names for MSG and sugar and all of these different ingredients. They are pumped with chemical ingredients that are more addicted than the heroin in some cases. So that is why your child is like screaming, throwing a tantrum because they want the boxed macaroni and cheese or, the Oreos or whatever. And so you have to just like it's like a drug addict. You have to wean them off is, what I've learned from talking to experts like you. Obviously, I haven't experienced this yet, but I'm trying to learn as much as I can from people like you.
Yeah, I learned that from Cali, and it blew my mind, but not really.
Yeah,
that
Cali means.
That cigarette companies switched over to food, but that makes perfect sense. Like that is literally what happens. And I actually said even before I knew that for a long time, that obesity is the new smoking. I mean, I really think that it's something that we have to come together to move in a different direction, because it's nearly impossible in the food system right now for everybody to be able to eat healthy. Like it doesn't exist as a food system. You as a family, if you're willing to spend the money and put in the effort, you could find good, healthy sources of food in general. You don't have to order a box or travel a little bit to get it. But as a society, we haven't set things up to offer people healthy food. And I think that is a bigger issue that we definitely need to focus on. But saying that poor people can't eat healthy is ridiculous. That is on us to make sure that we can offer things that are healthy, that can be affordable, and to talk about race and class and all of these things when it comes to food. Every child deserves healthy food. Everybody deserves healthy food.
That's propaganda. That is propaganda from the food companies to tell you that it's racist to eat this way, that it's classist to expect people to not eat ultra-processed food, that you'll never be able to afford it. That is propaganda that you have been told to sell you their products.
I mean, it's so infuriating, right?
Yeah.
I think as a practitioner, because it's so obvious and common sense that we should never say something like that. It's like you're saying that because somebody doesn't have the means, that they shouldn't be able to eat good food. No, everybody should be able to eat good food. That should be the norm. And if you want to have a snack every now and again, some sort of ultra processed food, it should be available if you want it, I guess. I mean, I don't think it actually should be available. We should probably get rid of it all, but that's not going to happen, but we can transition over 10 or 20 years to every community having a garden. Every community has parks. We could start building gardens for everybody to go to. We could start having stores grow things on their roofs. I mean, it is possible to start building farms in parking lots now.
Yep. There's people doing that. We've got something like that in Phoenix, in the Gilbert area. They've got something like that in Dallas. It's like a whole farm or something like that that's vertical, like a tall building.
And then, we hear, oh, but it's not possible. It's not sustainable and not everybody could have it. Well, we don't have to start from where we are with 95%, 99% all crap to everything's going to be homemade from a garden. But we can transition. I mean, even if 10 or 20% of the food is available locally and you can go get a few things every week, that's going to start to move things in a better direction. People will start to feel healthier. They'll be more interested in eating that way. There'll be new jobs. I mean, people can start gardening. It can be a government program that gardening in local areas and start teaching kids about these things. I mean, if we start that movement, it's going to change over 20 or 30 years. It's not going to happen in one day, but we can move money from ultra-processed food to healthy food because it's our priority and because it's obviously needed. We need to have good food. It's what we're built of. We need nutrients, and our food is crap, and there's no way for us to be healthy in the food system right now.
What advice do you have for the nurse or medical professional working in traditional medicine who are becoming disillusioned with the standard care model but feel paralyzed on what steps they can take next to just escape the matrix?
To escape the matrix, I think you have to get outside of that system and start to look into integrative medicine and natural medicine. There's such a need for it that I think people are just scared to change. But I mean, at my practice, we get so many applications every day for patients that we can't take most people that apply. I mean, there's such a need for it. And if you are interested in this, there are people that want your help. And if you're disillusioned, then start to learn about the other things and then open up your own practice or go work for a practitioner. You can look around. There's so many practices that need people. I mean, in Los Angeles, a huge city, there's like maybe 3-4 of us that are integrative medicine practitioners, but people are starting to get interested in it. I'm getting messages more and more from people in residency and medical school saying, this is so great. What did you learn? What did you take? How did you do it? And I think that people don't feel like they can do this. And at the end of the day, integrative medicine, you don't even need to take a course. You don't have to do anything. You just be open to letting people do what they want to do and be open to having discussions. That's integrative medicine. Prevention, talking about diet, exercise, nutrition, that's integrative medicine. You don't have to get so woo-woo and, you don't have to be a homeopathic practitioner or do acupuncture. You can if you want to, that's great. But even if you're just open to having discussions with families, talking about what they're doing at home, talking about the root cause, that's integrative medicine. And that is so needed. And people will be lining up for you. So there's no reason to be afraid of it. The movement is that way.
If you could offer any remedy to heal a sick culture, what would it be?
It would be changing our food system. So to me, if there's one thing that as a parent we could do specifically for our family, it's to read food labels, I would say, or just labels in general. Read the label on everything you buy from now on. You do not need to be a chemist to understand what's going on that food label. If it's a long chemical word, and you don't know what it is, it's probably not good for you. Put it back. Find things that have words that you know. You don't have to go from chips to broccoli, but you can get 2 bags of chips and you can look at the ingredients and buy the better bag, and it adds up. Every little decision matters, and we need to take our power back. I think if we start to decide that the decisions that we make matter,
yes,
then you're going to prioritize health. And if we stop prioritizing cheaper, faster, better, and we prioritize health as part of that equation, then you will slowly see your family's health change. And if everybody does that, then the companies will change because they're not going to sell things that don't sell.
Remind everybody what the name of your practice is, and are you accepting new patients?
So our office is accepting new patients. Every now and again, I'll accept some, but the practice is integrative pediatrics, and I'm in Los Angeles.
Where can people follow you on social media?
So they can follow me on X or Instagram at Dr. Joel Gator, and they can get the book Parenting at Your Child's Pace, everywhere that books are sold, on Amazon or parentingatyourchildspace.com.
Thank you, Dr. Gator, for coming on Culture Apothecary.
Thanks for having me.
My idea behind this week's 2 episodes was to invite 2 different pediatricians to discuss some of the most controversial decisions often made in children's healthcare. Because I know my parents in the audience may be attending some family gatherings this Christmas season where you're asked to pass the potatoes and defend some of the parenting decisions you may have made. I hope that now you feel prepared to do that and encouraged to stay on this path. Please leave a 5-star review as a Christmas gift to me and tell others why they should listen to Culture Apothecary. We are on a mission to heal a sick culture. Twice a week, new guests bring a unique remedy. Subscribe to Real Alex Clark on YouTube and follow me on Instagram at Real Alex Clark. It's Christmas. If you love the show, tell your loved ones you want merch for a gift. tpusamerch.com, code Alex Clark for 10% off. New episodes every Monday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. I'm Alex Clark, and this is Culture Apothecary.